Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we're just going to paint a relaxing and easy beach scene. Let's jump in. Today I'm using my Paul Rubens watercolor journal. This is a cold pressed cotton watercolor paper. So far the only painting I've done in it is this butterfly. If you're interested in the butterfly tutorial, check that out. I'm very impressed with this paper so far. It's a super affordable cotton watercolor paper that you can get on Amazon. And for those of you who might have a tight budget when it comes to art supplies, this is a great option. I'm just using a single brush today. This is my size 8 Trekell Protege synthetic round brush. I have a couple of water jars and my palette with 18 colors in it. I'll tell you guys what colors I'm using as we go along, but basically you're just going to need the primary colors for this tutorial. You're going to need red, yellow, and blue. Also make sure you have paper towel for blotting. That's always important. Now I've applied some washi tape all around my paper just so that I have a nice border, and it helps it look really nice when you're flipping through your journal to have those pretty borders. That's just optional, of course. Now, the first thing we need to do is decide on the horizon line of our beach, and I want it to be slightly higher than the center line. So I'm just going to use a ruler here, and very lightly I'm going to draw a line showing the horizon line for the water. Then the only other little bit of drawing that we're going to do is a little bit of land right over here, very lightly sketching it on. And then where the surf is meeting the sand, you can make it any shape you want. I am going to roughly follow my reference photo, which is from Unsplash, by the way. I'll include a link in the description so you guys can download that and follow along. I'm going to start actually with the center point of the surf, because right in the middle is where there's this little unique turn that happens in the wave. And this is just my interpretation of my reference photo. It's not going to be a perfect sketch. Whenever you're doing something like this, guys, go into it with the expectation that you're just going to have fun. You're going to practice. You're going to explore your paints and your colors. And every time you sit down to paint is an opportunity to just improve your skills and have fun. So there's absolutely no pressure. There should be no fear going into this. Just joy. All right, so once you're happy with the shape of your line of the ocean wave right there, we can get started. Now in the reference photo, there's a lot of details. We're going to leave those out. We're going to try to simplify as much as possible. Let's start with the sky. For the sky, we're going to do some wet and wet technique. I'm going to swirl my brush in the clean water and then remove the excess on the side of my jar. Then I'm going to paint that clean water all across the top of my paper. What we see in the reference photo is a blue sky with some yellow clouds that have purple in them, quite beautiful and somewhat complex. The wet and wet technique is going to be your best friend as far as helping those colors fuse and look really natural on the paper. I'm painting with my clean water all the way up to my horizon line, even over the top of where that brilliant sunlight is. The wonderful thing about using wet and wet is that you can get really soft, diffused edges and natural looking soft fluffy clouds in your sky without a whole lot of effort. So notice how I'm just stroking my brush side to side, continuing to lay down more water so that the paper is nice and soaked, glossy wet, but no puddles are formed. Now you'll want to work fairly quickly here. I'm going to start with the lightest color, that yellow that I see in the clouds. I'm mixing up some Hansa yellow light. It's actually kind of an orangey yellow, so let's take some of this orange yellow color and let's paint a cloud right here in the corner. Just kind of blot that in. And another one above the landmass right here. We are not perfectly copying our reference photo by any means. We're just blotting in some little clouds and bringing that yellow-orange right up to the sun. But don't paint into the sun. We want that area to look like the brightest explosion of sunlight possible. All right, so that's it for yellow. Rinse that out. Then really quickly grab some phthalo blue or whatever bright blue you want for your sky. Swirl it around on your palette so you can kind of see how dark or how light it is. And then using a side-to-side motion, swipe that into your sky, painting that right up to your yellow clouds. Try not to cover the yellow clouds, otherwise you'll end up with green. You can paint that right up to the horizon line. Dip in the water if it starts to dry out already. And don't paint over your sun, paint right up to it. So right here, this bright spot in the center of my painting, that's where I want my sun to be in the sunset. Grabbing a little more blue, painting it right up next to that yellow cloud. While your paper's still wet, you have a little bit of leeway to push and pull the paint without necessarily disrupting the layers or causing backwash. Notice how I'm always blotting on my paper towel to control how much water's in my brush. That's so important because you don't want to end up with extra water on already wet paper. What happens is something called the cauliflower effect. I'm sure you've heard that term before if you've been painting with watercolor for a little while. Okay, I'm going to rinse out that blue. Now I'm going to grab some alizarin crimson, swirl it around on my palette and mix in a little of that blue to make it a little more purple. And we're going to drop that into the lower part of each cloud. Using just a little blotting motion, just kind of blip, 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 dab, dab. Again, not too much water in your brush. Your clouds should still be wet if you're working fairly quickly. And you can see that that cloud purple is naturally just softening and dispersing into the paper, spreading into the wet area of paper and paint, forming these lovely little cloud shadows. Paint that into the sky just above the ocean. Remember not to cover up your sun. And then painting some of these explosions of clouds, purple clouds that are happening around that sunlight. I'm going to just gently swipe in a horizontal motion all along the ocean line right here so that we have this beautiful hint of purpley pink right there. And then I'm going to soften and smooth that with a little bit of a damp brush to blend out those colors. Grab more pink as needed to paint some more purple clouds. I'm going to mix in a little of the blue just to make them more, ooh, too much. Just to make them more distinctly purple. Again, just kind of using this blotting motion with my brush. Nothing too specific. Remember, clouds, they come in all shapes and sizes, don't they? There's no such thing as a perfect cloud. And don't set your expectation that you're going to be painting perfect clouds by any means. But just make them pleasing to you. Lovely, pleasing, soft, fluffy shapes. That's what we're going for here. Putting a big purple cloud right there in the corner. And that's helping balance out that wonderful yellow cloud on the opposite side. Not bad. I think we'll stop there for now. All right, I am going to mix up some more of my alizarin crimson with my phthalo blue, but mostly alizarin crimson. And with this slightly pinkish color, it's kind of a purplish pink, we're going to paint the sand underneath this little landmass here in the upper left corner. It's a very small little strip of land kind of jutting out over the ocean here. And there's a bit of sand, and in the sunlight, in the sunset colors, it looks purple. Then let's take some of that phthalo blue and do a first layer on the green portion of the land. I'm actually going to leave a couple little light spots with my brush. And then we're going to take that Hansa yellow light. It's too green. Let's take this yellow orange here and paint that in those little white spots that we missed. And then we're going to paint some foliage here along the edge of this landmass that's glowing. It's on fire from the sunlight behind it, that setting sun. And we're going to paint the beginning of a palm tree with that bright yellow. Just a teeny little palm tree or two, all on fire with that yellow-orange color. Now we need to darken that. To do that, let's take some brown. I have transparent brown oxide. I'm going to mix that in with that blue for kind of this dark, earthy brown color. And with that, we're going to paint more specifically the silhouette of the palm trees and darken up the shape of the land. Kind of there, I guess it looks like trees and bushes, maybe some buildings. It's very tiny, so it's hard to tell. So just fill in a dark shape for the land. Just leaving your ocean, leaving your sand color a little lighter. If that yellow is dry enough, you can go in and add darker colors for the palm tree, so it's more silhouetted against the sky. I'm adding little bushes here, tiny little brush strokes using the tip of my brush. All right, so there we have our sky and our land and this brilliant light which we avoided with the paint, representing the sun setting. By the way, if you guys like my style of teaching and you're ready to take your watercolor skills to the next level, check out my Watercolor Mastery membership. I'll leave a link in the description below. Included with the membership are over 100 fully narrated real-time tutorials, completely ad-free. I also include a traceable line drawing and reference photo and a list of supplies used in every single video. It's a wonderful way to improve your skills, and when you become a member, you can join our Facebook group where you can share all your amazing watercolor paintings with other artists like you. All right, let's get back to the video. This might seem a little counterintuitive, but let's go ahead and do the foreground next. We're going to just do the sand. I'm going to wet it first, just like we did with the sky, and paint right up to that surf line where that foamy water is just touching the sand. Once again, having wet paper is going to help your paint soften out beautifully. And avoid that natural hard edge that tends to form with watercolor. All right, so you've got a nice glossy surface. Grab your yellow-orange or Hansa yellow light, whatever yellow you have, but add a little bit of orange in if you'd like it to look more glowing and ethereal. And right here, kind of in the middle where that sunlight is reflecting off the sand, we want to have that yellow color right up next to the surf. And also leave a little bit of white of the paper where the sun itself is reflecting on the sand. And then I'm softening that out with a horizontal motion of my brush, kind of connecting that yellow all into the sand over here. Now this is a little bit of a tricky color to tell what it is. It's almost this very, very light lavender. So I'm going to take some of that alizarin crimson and phthalo blue that are on my palette. A little more alizarin crimson. And let's actually mix in some of that golden yellow. And then we're going to paint the sand, this sort of mauve-y purple, very watered down. It's just a tinted wash, more water than paint. But control on your paper towel how much water is in your brush to avoid blossoms. All right, so with just that wet and wet kind of purplish wash, that's looking really nice. Let's take a little of our phthalo blue, dip in the water so it's not so bright. And let's just add some little streakiness to the sand, wet and wet, with that blue color. And with more of a broad wash, I'm kind of darkening the bottom portion of the painting, of the composition over here with some of that blue. And one more little pop of yellow underneath this little edge. All right, let's do the water next. So for the water, We're going to use Wet and Wet again. No surprise there. But let's avoid the edge of the surf. Let's avoid that foamy edge and try to paint right up to it with our colors. So we're going to leave that the white of the paper for now. We need to make it a little darker than the sunlight itself because in the reference photo it's still a darker value than that brilliant sun. But to help preserve the look of the foam, we're leaving that alone. Let's take some more purple. We're going to mix up Alizarin Crimson and Phthalo Blue. And let's paint the bottom section of the water. Just kind of the side to side. Rather messy motion. Little horizontal, almost slightly curved brush strokes. Leave some of the white of the paper in between your brush strokes. That's really important to add some depth and detail to your painting. Let's take a little more solid Phthalo Blue now for our brush strokes here in the middle. A little more blue mixed in with that purple. Then while you've got that blue on your brush, go ahead and paint the top portion of this part of the ocean right up to your horizon line. When you get to this area where the sun is shining, slow down and don't put any marks right there just yet. See how I'm pulling my brush sideways and allowing it to miss a little bit in between. So there's a variety in my brush strokes. It's not just all flat. Grab some more blue to suggest deeper ocean waves. I need a little more purple for the left side of the composition over here. It's slightly more purple in the reference photo. A little bit of water so that it's not so dark, especially as we come in towards the sunshine here in the center. Dipping in the water again. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint right underneath the sun, much lighter value here. All right, now we need a little yellow again. So I'm taking that yellow orange and mixing that in between my purple brush strokes. Pulling that up really close to where that sun is shining. Our goal is to leave sort of this white cascade of reflected light on the water. Remember, we're just trying to get the impression of what we're seeing. We're not painting exactly what we're seeing. This isn't photorealism here in this little journal. We're just trying to paint a beautiful, expressive ocean sunset. Okay, I have a red color here. If you have red on your palette, as most of us do, just grab kind of a red, mix it up on your palette with plenty of water. And you can mix it in with your purple a little bit. And now we're going to more specifically carve out the shape of the foam where the water meets the sand. Leaving a more decided line right there. Tiny little brush strokes to help add that detail. Again, try not to intersect too much of the white where the sun is shining right there. Now I'm taking a little more blue. Let's just mix up a dark color. We need alizarin crimson, blue, and maybe even a little of the yellow. So kind of combining all of our primaries. And let's paint a dark shadow underneath the foamy wave. I'm not painting along some of these edges. I'm painting along the edges where these bits of water are actually casting a shadow from the sunlight just behind them. You don't really think of water as being something that casts a shadow, but it definitely does. Definitely has a mass to it, especially the ocean. And then with that dark color, you can also go back into the water, paint more specific little markings to show shadows between the waves. Dip in the water if your paint isn't flowing real easily for you, just to kind of loosen it on your brush without removing the paint completely. And then you can paint little, see how I'm just flattening my brush on the surface of the paper, but allowing the tip of the brush to make it look like it's going skinny to fat with those brush strokes. And that really is a good technique to use for these waves. Horizontal motion of your round brush. We'll just add a couple little details on this side. Now is your final detail portion of the painting, so really just look over the whole thing. See if there's anywhere that could benefit from a few extra brush strokes, a little bit of darkening here and there. I'm going to take some more yellow-orange and just kind of boost the color in the sand right here in the front. Beginning watercolor artists tend to be afraid to go too dark. Don't be afraid. Just dive right in. You'll be amazed at how much more depth and perspective it has when you go dark enough. One area I think we could go darker is the ocean right over here. So let's take a little bit of that phthalo blue again, mix in some water, and be brave. Just go right over what you've already painted with enough water so that it softens and spreads evenly for you. And gently pull that right up to the sunlit area. Dipping in the water so it's lighter in value. And I'm going to go over this area too, including some of that surf. Like I said, I don't want that to be quite as bright as where the sunlight is. Always, the light source is going to be the brightest thing. So don't let anything else compete with that light source, including these white details in the water. If you find a little blue shadows, yes, much better. If you want to darken any of these clouds a little bit, of course you can. This is your painting, so make it what you want. I do encourage you not to mess too much with clouds. Once you've done wet and wet, it looks really good. Just trust that your first layer will turn out all right. I think that's pretty good. So let's take the tape off and see how we did. Oh, that was so much fun, and it's making me want to go on a vacation now. But there's our finished ocean scene. Guys, I had a blast painting this with you. I hope you'll try it. Tag me on Instagram at @olsonart. I'd love to see it. Check out these other videos about painting with watercolor, and I'll see you there.